When I was a teenager, my dad bought me a classic 1972 Ford Bronco. It was my true passion, and I don't recall a memory from high school that somehow doesn't involve that truck. Plus, my dad and I would spend hours and hours working on it together, and we went through that especially father/son rough patch. When I was teenager, it was always that Bronco that brought us back together. I made a huge mistake and sold the truck when I turned 19, and my dad died of a heart attack 2 months later, so while not logical, I've always felt a karmic connection between the two events. We had a baby in early February. She is our first and the light of my life. My wife is doing well, but she's back at work and she's realized that she hates all the daycares we've tried and really wants to be a stay-at-home mom, and plus she's still very hormonal from delivery. Lack of sleep and breastfeeding, so she's having a rough time and is angry a lot. I guess I need to say this. 2 weeks ago I was driving through our town's warehouse district and saw a Bronco that was pretty beat up but resembled mine. I stopped just for nostalgia's sake, and the owner came out and let me take a look inside. My dad and I had glued a wheat penny under the dash as sort of security measure, so I just sort of checked, and goddamned if it wasn't my Bronco. I asked him if he'd ever consider selling it. He said actually someone was on I-25 as we spoke from Colorado to buy it for $21,000. I freaked out and asked him if I could buy it right then and there for $23,000. He said if I could come up with the cash, yes. I had been procrastinating setting up a 529, so I had $12,000 in savings that my wife's parents had given us. I maxed out my credit card to Venmo, and my mom bought down a check for $4,000, and I drove away in my old car. It was like a dream come true. Like a literal dream come true. It needs a lot of work I can't afford right now, but it's mine. Like in my driveway, mine. Again. I can't even describe what a joy this is. My wife and her parents are furious with me. They feel I was deceptive, that a real man would have sacrificed anything and everything so my wife could go stay at home with his kids, and that's setting aside that they gave us the money for a college fund. My point is, my daughter is only 6 months old. We have 18 years to set up a college fund of her. But this Bronco means everything to me, and if I wouldn't have acted, it would have been gone forever. Now it can be that same connection between me and my kids. To me, it's the literal meaning of happiness. I talked with my mom, and she is basically going to buy the Bronco from me in order to refill the college fund and pay off the credit card. The $4,000 will be a gift, and she's going to give me whatever I need to restore it. She's always been awesome to me, and she's rather the money be spent now than wait for me and my sister's inheritance. I didn't tell my wife that my mom bailed me out and lied and said I found a buyer for the Bronco. I'll figure out how to cross that bridge when I get there, but my wife was so relieved that I had come to your senses. I don't want to disappoint her. It's going to take all my lying skills to pull this one off over the next few years. I met her 2 years ago when we worked together and quickly became very close. She helped me through the darkest times of my life. I was mid-split with an abusive ex when we met, and I helped her through some really tough and unimaginable things. There were lots of rumors at the time we were seeing each other, and everyone assumed we were an item. But for the past 2 years our relationship has been purely platonic. She was my best friend, and up until a few weeks back I don't think we'd even ever hugged. Fast forward to a week ago, she came over for dinner and wine. This is very common and normal. We had more than usual, and she was over the limit so couldn't drive, so she stayed the night. We slept in the same bed but apart, and no physical contact again. It was completely normal and just as expected. We somehow didn't get up and ended up staying in bed until 10 p.m. the next day just talking. Sometime during that evening she got upset about something going on in her life. I rubbed her back while telling her everything will be okay, and then we just cuddled. Probably the first bit of real physical contact between us, but nothing was sexual. Didn't feel weird, and she went home and it was all okay. This last weekend we had a hiking holiday planned, where we'd be sleeping in her van. She has a converted Transit. It's one bed, but we thought we'd be fine. First night it was freezing, ending up cuddling and spooning, but again didn't feel sexual. Second night is where it all went a bit wrong. We drank a bit too much and the spoon ended up getting carried away. It seems to be a joint thing, and before I knew it we were kissing and touching each other everywhere. It was a bit of a frenzy of this for about 15 minutes until we both stopped and realized what we just did. After this we spoke a little and asked if either of us regretted it. We both said we didn't, but it was odd. She got upset and I told her it was okay, it didn't change anything and we could just draw a line under it. We woke up the next morning and it happened again. We didn't talk too much but then went for a walk, and then just before we headed home we ended up all over each other again. We were completely naked but again stopped, cuddled and lay there. We both agreed it was a what happens in X, stays in X type event. It was a really long trip home, 6 hours plus. During this she would rest her head on my hand on lap ECT, and it seemed very different to our usual dynamic. When we stopped at services for breaks we seemed to walk arm in arm. We kept kissing on and off, but it seemed strangely normal. We arrived back at her home. She lives with her dad at the moment, but just before I left she kissed me again and thanked me for a wonderful weekend. The following day she came over to get some stuff I took home with me. We end up just cuddling, kissing, feeling and so on again, but she has dinner with a friend and we stop it there. She goes on her way. This should feel really weird and strange, but it felt completely normal and we both discussed it that it was so odd it felt normal. Yesterday she turned up unannounced at my place, which is not a normal thing, with coffee and donuts. We end up talking, cuddling, kissing again, and then we end up talking about what this is, the big problem. Neither of us were sure. She got panicky and burst out in tears and left. She said she was really scared and her words were, "I think I will end up pushing you away and hurting you and I don't want to do that to you." I told her I would come and see her later and talk. I drove to her house but her ex was there, another slight issue. They broke up 6 years ago, stayed close friends. He is a lovely bloke but in his head he is certain they will get married and have children. She's had the conversation with him but he seems to shut it off. If he found out she was seeing anyone he would get extremely angry. But there's so much family history intertwined between the both, it's really complicated. For that reason she has avoided seeing anyone in the past 6 years. The reason he turned up is she hadn't responded to him since the night we kissed. I went home when I saw his car and just said she could come to mine to chat later. She turned up, sad and very emotional. She explained she ran off because she is terrified of losing our friendship. I said let's just cut the romance out, draw a line under it and be friends again, but she seemed to not speak much when I said this. I asked if her ex was the issue. She said it was nothing to do with us but a whole other issue. But that was not impacting what was going on between us. We sat quietly, hugged, and I tried to reassure it would be okay, and I wasn't going to start hating her for whatever reason. And I am completely fine with just being platonic friends again. We both agree and say whatever happens we stay friends and nobody gets hurt, but we will pull back from the more physical side. I woke up this morning really panicky. I have no idea where we are, where we stand, and absolutely terrified of losing our friendship. I don't know what to do or say. I felt sick to my stomach and can't eat at the thought of this. She is coming around later to collect some of her clothes she left last night, and I am thinking I need a plan of what to say / do. I cannot lose my best friend. She is absolutely everything to me, but I am worried we crossed a line and there's only one eventual outcome which won't be good. My graduation ceremony is being held next week. My dad had given me some money in advance to pay for the party. I live mostly with my mom, but they were supposed to be hosting the event together. Dad and I have a rocky relationship. After my parents divorced when I was 4, they split custody of me and he was able to stay a good dad. When I was 10 he met Jane. Jane had 3 kids, twins and a single kid. They got married when I was 12, but I would say even before that I felt like he prioritized her kids over me a lot. He would cancel plans with me if they wanted to do something and would either do the thing with them or force me to go and say it was even better than our plans, when for me it wasn't. Think going for a hike with me versus taking them to an indoor play area. Or seeing a movie with me versus the kiddie park. One more example is when I was given a ticket for a concert my dad and I both love. He was supposed to buy a ticket to come with me for some father / son time, but actually spent it on his youngest stepkid who wanted their room painted. He told me at the last minute and it hurt. There are other times stuff like this happened. He didn't show up at the hospital when I broke my arm because one stepkid was getting their tonsils out and wanted both him and his wife there. He told my mom over the phone to tell me he was proud of me for being brave and understanding. When I would bring this stuff up to him, he'd tell me it was natural to feel jealous of sharing his attention. That was all he would say. In 2019, he told my mom he would split the cost of a trip I wanted to go on with one of my clubs, because she didn't have the money all by herself. Mom had her half saved. We told my dad he needed to pay. He said bills were tight and it was the twins' birthdays and the money needed to go on something for them. He told me we could do something as a family when the trip happened instead. I told him to forget it. That he was making it clear who was more important and I was going to stay with my mom where I actually mattered. Mom borrowed money to cover the other half of the trip. Dad told me he regretted making me feel less important and we were working on things, and then the graduation money was given about a month ago. Then a week ago he called and told me how one of the stepkids was being bullied, how bad of a time they're having it. And with that money they could help cheer them up for their birthday. I was pissed. I hung up. Then 2 days later I showed up at his doorstep, gave him the money and told him I didn't want to see him or his new family at my graduation, and that he had chosen who was more important, so he better stay out of my life. His stepkids and 2 younger bio kids were there. I didn't stick around. He called and told me we needed to talk it out like adults, and that I had hurt the kids' feelings. His wife freaked out on me, so I blocked her. My brother lost his job along with all his savings several months ago, and soon after he asked me if it would be okay if he and his wife stayed with me until they could afford their own place again. I hesitated at first, considering I only have a 1-bedroom apartment, but according to them they had no other options, so of course I invited them over and bought a blow-up mattress for the living room. For the first month things were manageable, although admittedly cramped. Then my brother told me that sleeping on the mattress was giving him back pains. So he asked if he could buy a small double bed for the living room. The living room is by far the biggest room I have, so I told him that would be fine as long as there was still room for my couch, TV, bookshelves. The living room is also connected to my kitchen in an open plan style. So I reminded my brother to leave walking space around the bed. It's now been 2 months and things have gotten a lot worse. When they first moved in, I would still use the living room every day to unwind on the couch after work. Now whenever I go in, there's a strange vibe like I'm intruding. My brother and his wife are often sitting in bed together when I go in. I always knock and stare at me pointedly until I leave. Sometimes when I sit down they will directly ask me for some alone time and say they would like the room to themselves. This came to a head yesterday when my sister-in-law messaged me with a timetable she'd made of when it would be a good time for me to use the living room. The timetable basically says that they will allow me into the room for an hour each evening, plus 20 minutes around meal times. I basically shut her down instantly and told her there was no way I'd be following the timetable since in the end it's my apartment. She sent me back a huge message with a dozen paragraphs about how my constant presence was ruining her marriage with my brother and they feel like they have no privacy. I tried to talk this over with my brother that night, but when I got home neither my brother //SIL were talking to me. So he's clearly just as pissed. Today an Amazon parcel arrived for my brother with a lock for the living room door, which I told him there's absolutely no way I will allow him to install. My brother says I'm creepy for wanting constant access to where they sleep and he's insisting on installing the lock anyway.